everyone. So really excited to have one of the most smiling business person I know, Daniel Bernard, who is the actually founder of Redwood, International Sports. And Daniel, I think it would be better if you'll introduce yourself.
All right. Thank you, Kirill. Thank you very much for the intro. It's nice that my smile seems to go a long way, which is wonderful. 25 plus years in the sports industry, really. That's all I've ever been involved in my adult life, from broadcast, which was a great grounding in the sports industry. It taught me about how sports event is created and how people engage with it both at the stadium and at home. And then I had the great fortune in 2004 of founding Redwood International Sports, as you said, which has been my anchor ever since, specializing in sports data and analytics. We look at everything that goes on in the field of play and try to tell the best story possible. That led me also in 2015 to have a second major entrepreneurial journey, which was focused on iGaming and sports entertainment. And I set up platforms for emerging markets, which was great. And I moved to the board of that company in 2020, which is when I turned myself into an investor. And since then, I've worn the hat of investor as well. I've done my fair share of angel investing, and I sit on the advisory board for Sharp Alpha, which is my favorite VC in the sports and entertainment industry. And I'm connected to a lot of investment professionals and VCs in the industry, and it keeps me with my finger on the pulse of what's going on today in the sports industry. And from an entrepreneurial point of view, I've now set up a non-profit called Ride for Unity, which has been going very well for about 2 years, where we're trying to use sports, not trying, we're succeeding in using sports to bring a lot of very, very different people together to rebuild bridges to trust in a world that is very fragmented these days and very polarized. We're operational in the UAE, operational in Rwanda, and my long-term vision is to have hubs on every continent so that we can bring the strengths of each place to all the other places. So that's myself in a very, very large nutshell.
Okay, yeah, like we've talked with you previously, you have a lot of different avenues and a big interest and experience. So, like if we go to the beginning, you mentioned that you started from the broadcasting side of the things. Could you tell us a little bit about this experience and how it shaped your view on the industry, on fan engagement in sports, and I guess that led to other your, entrepreneurial, avenues in future.
Sure. So I got involved in broadcast when I was, how old was I? 25, so quite a young guy, 25, 26. And I'd already worked in sports a little bit, but those avenues had really changed. And I landed in Israel in 99, and I was looking to work in sports, but I had to learn the language, the local language here of Hebrew. And by the time I did, I was really looking for a job in sports. And it's a piece of advice that I give so many people recently who say, Daniel, how can I get into sports? And honestly, for the majority, the only pathways into sports from the outside are either, the way I see it, right at the bottom. So to start from scratch, which is what I did, or right at the top, where you're a professional CEO or a C-suite executive and you can be drafted in to do what you've done in other industries in the sports industry. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult to get into the sports industry in the middle because there's a lot of, people generally don't want to leave the sports industry. So that once they're in, they get promoted, and promotion often happens from within. So I was very happy, to be honest, at the age of 26 it was, to just go down to the bottom, take an absolute entry-level job. I just wanted to start. And that's what I was doing at the Sports Channel. I was doing some logistics work. I was literally running tapes from editing to production and just doing whatever anyone asked from me. But because I had a few languages, I very quickly got given lots of tasks to do with anything to do with abroad. And within about 6 months, people started giving me the nickname Minister of the Foreign Minister of the Sports Channel in Israel, because anything that was, they said, oh, just give it to Daniel. If it was dealing with a company in Italy, oh, give it to Daniel. He speaks Italian. Oh, there's a company in the US, give it to Daniel. And that was really my strength. And so I was asked to deal with anything from sorting out E&G trucks when we had our reporters on site at a basketball somewhere around the world, or dealing with the satellite transition from that recording hopping through Asia and Europe to our master control room in Israel, or transitioning that feed to our editing room. Anything to do with abroad, it just landed on my desk. Or even it was just getting accreditation for one of our journalists who happened to be abroad and wanted to be at the Formula One, or things like that. And so I was exposed to a wide range of logistical and operational requirements, what actually goes on the ground to make a sports event happen. If, let's say, one of the Israeli teams was playing in Europe, in UEFA or whatever, then you'd get Sky News or something coming over to Israel, and I would then be their host, take them to the stadium, show them what the production facilities were. So I had to learn all of that for myself, and I got to
Mm-hmm.
understand the difference between an 8 camera production, a 16 camera production, and the requirements there that we might have locally, or a foreign company might have as well. And so you really did understand what it takes to set up a sporting event, prepare the production, all the pre-game, all the live, all the post-game highlights, reels, everything. So it's and because I was present at the stadium for a lot of those productions, so I could see exactly how the people at the stadium interacted with the game as well. And when we think about the sports industry, it doesn't matter whether you're in ticketing, food and beverage, betting, it doesn't matter. The central piece is the sports event. Everything revolves around that sports event. And so seeing it and understanding how it's created and how the fan engages with it was absolutely critical. And so that was great.
Mm-hmm.
I worked 3.5 years at the sports channel, and I ended up doing rights acquisitions, which was the thing I enjoyed most, negotiating to bring new product and new content to Israeli television. And that was fantastic for me. And it taught me a hell of a lot about business as well, about negotiating as a young man. And yeah, it was the best entry I could possibly imagine into the industry.
This is yeah, this is a huge school like of a sports industry we could tell.
Yeah.
And let's say what led you to, I don't know how it happened, leaving your job and starting something on your own and getting into the journey of uncertainty and just,
Yeah.
having
Well,
some of this, crazy parts of yourself, right?
yeah. Well, I have, even before that job, I had already discovered myself as an entrepreneur. I had, up until then, I think it was just the one. No, I had two entrepreneurial ventures by the time I was 25. The first one was a huge failure. I made absolutely every mistake you could possibly make as a first-time entrepreneur. So much so that today, 25, 26 years later, I give a workshop called How Not to Build a Small Business based on that experience. I laughed recently. A couple of years ago, I found what was written on it, my business plan for that business. And it was just a to-do list. It wasn't a business plan at all. It was just funny looking at my younger self and all the lack of knowledge that I had back then on what really to do. So I had that. And then I had another one, which was actually going quite well, but I realized it wasn't what I wanted to do. It was an English language school. And I just realized when things were starting to do well, I had to make a decision with myself. Am I going to take the next step, or am I going to try something else? I realized it wasn't my dream to set up another Berlitz, for example. So that was when I was looking for something else, and I started with the sports channel. What led to me then setting up Redwood International Sports, which was my first major success as an entrepreneur, I think it was a couple of things. One of them is external and one of them is internal to me. So internally, I've always been an entrepreneur. I've always liked taking risks. I've liked pushing the envelope. So it's just, it's pushing me. My life is always pushing me to look at those sort of avenues. But then the external thing, the macro factor that was nothing to do with me, was the fact that the media industry in this country and even in the region was going downhill in around, talking about 2000, 2003. It was becoming very, very difficult. And I told you that I was dealing with rights acquisitions. And the last year of my work at the sports channel on the rights side, I did so much more of cancelling contracts rather than creating new contracts, that it was not the pleasurable job that I really had started to enjoy. It became difficult, and my challenges were often how to reduce contracts, maybe cancel contracts, negotiate ourselves out of it, and stay alive in many times as a channel. It wasn't that positive interaction that I'd become used to in the year or two prior. And so I was, I like building stuff. I don't like just, being the guy who keeps things alive. That was the thing that was sort of setting me up to think about other things. And I was already on the lookout for anything else. And then all of a sudden, a friend called me and says, we've got an idea about how to look at football differently from a statistical point of view. And it immediately caught my imagination. And by the third call with him, I said, come on, let's do this. This sounds interesting. And I quit my job and just started, basically.
Okay, yeah. So was there is a point where you were, feeling a little bit scared, like if it's not gonna work out, or maybe that's just idea I like, but it actually doesn't matter to anyone? Like, have you had this doubts in back of your mind quitting your job?
No, not even for a second. I think that the biggest asset that I've always had is that I'm just inherently not scared of the unknown. I've just always actually really loved the unknown, which is rare, because most people you meet, their biggest blocker is that they're scared of what they don't know. And I haven't had to train myself. I've just always been like this, and I just like being scared of the unknown for me, it just doesn't make sense. Like people say, well, what if? I'm like, what do you mean, what if? You have no idea. You have absolutely no idea. So you might as well just go and find out. And I've never been one to sort of think, oh, what might go wrong here? I'm naturally an optimist, so I always think about what's probably going to go right, which I think as an entrepreneur, you've got to be like that, even if it's a bit delusional sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you need people like me need someone next to us who will open our eyes to the risks. And so over the years, I've become much more calculated about the risks I take. So I think I'm an improved entrepreneur now. I would have just taken blind risks when I was a young man, but I don't regret those either because those efforts really shaped who I am today as well, and the failures that I had really helped
Mm-hmm.
me understand better how not to do things. There's nothing. It's a true thing. You learn best from your failures. So you can only have failures if you try stuff. So I've been just very blessed with those as well. So yeah, in answer to your question, I never once, was I worried if it would work or not? Yeah, not worried, like wondering. I was never really
Yeah.
worried. I was like, yeah, it'll be okay one way or the other. It'll be okay. And I think fortunately within about 8 months we had proven that there's something of real value here.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when I think I had major confidence that what we're building is going to be very good economically, as well as providing me with a lot of fulfillment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. So tell us about like when you start building. Tell us about the story, the Redwood story.
So, I mean, the idea behind Redwood is to look at anything that goes on the field of play. And we worked on
Mm-hmm.
football, only football, for 8 years before we added other sports. And the reason for that was obvious because football is the biggest sport in the world. You've got a huge amount of coverage, tens of thousands of games being broadcast. So the engagement in football, when I say football for any American viewers who have, I'm talking about soccer, of
Soccer.
course, not NFL. NFL, by the way, is a fascinating sport from a statistics point of view. It's just not many games really, unless
Yeah.
you talk about college as well. But with football, the big advantage was when you think back to 2004. It's the world game, the most exciting game, the most followed game in the whole world. But from a statistical point of view, there was really nothing much available. You could find out the score, of course, and even then on some leagues it would be late. But beyond that, if anyone follows football, I know you've played football as well. You know that 2-1 might not have been a very correct reflection of what happened on the pitch. And there's always the healthy argument between fans. It's like, oh, it should have been 2-0 or it should have been 3-0 or the referee robbed us and all this sort of stuff. Redwood's mission was to really understand what is actually going on the field of play, regardless of what the final score was, even though taking that into account as well.
Mm-hmm.
And in that way, over the course of years, we've got into such minutiae of what the real score could possibly be or should possibly be. And we were talking about we weren't using the same verbiage, but XG, expected goals,
Mm-hmm.
became a thing around 2011, 2012. I was smiling when this sort of came out of the press because that's basically what we've been doing since 2004, is
Mm-hmm.
really having a look at what the score should have been. Every attack, how does it actually get measured in what the team could do and what it can predict it can do going forward? And not just the team, but the players as well. And once you've got that, and you're confident that you've got statistics that are useful, because that's another thing, that many of the statistics that are delivered in sports are noise. They're actually
Yeah.
useless. And people don't realize that. And why would you? It takes a lot of effort and statistical knowledge to understand if a stat is actually valuable or if it's just noise. So once you've got that, you can use that on a number of verticals. You can use it with clubs, you can use it with national teams. Going back to clubs, we can help them buy the right players for cheap prices. We can help them prepare for the next Saturday. National teams, you can going into the World Cup. How often does a team like USA play against Iran, for example? Almost never. So understanding your position and how to prepare for that. Penalty analysis, it's an obvious one. When you see goalkeepers pull out something from their sockets from companies like ours. Obviously, the gambling industry and the betting industry has used our services as well. And media as well. Those are our major verticals. And the application of good data, it could be anywhere really.
Okay, yeah, so like you said, everything is, around sport event, right? And sport fan. So what do you see like how the sport fan and fans evolved from when you started and until now? What are their needs and how do you see the fan engagement side of the things in terms of the data?
Well, I mean, the more exposed fans are to the technological capabilities, obviously since Redwood started, smartphones have become a thing. It's crazy to think Redwood began before smartphones. It's like I still had my old Nokia when we set up Redwood. It's that's a major development, and of course, since 2007, roughly, the advent of social media has completely flipped the way fans engage with the sport. Huge transition from traditional media to social media, of course. Huge value as well on social media for sponsors because that's where the major eyeballs are. And I think the sports industry has never fully adapted to that, to be honest. As an investor, I have one investment that I was so bullish with at the start, and I'm still bullish, but it's taking much more time to come to fruition than I imagined. And it was all about maximizing the inventory of social media engagement. And when I made that investment in 2020, 2021, I was like, well, this is exactly what people need. Instead of, let's say, Emirates paying tens of millions to have the shirt sponsor, they can pay a lot less. Or in addition, they can pay to get sponsorship through every time a post of Ronaldo when he was playing at Real Madrid would be on social media because there's lots of eyeballs on his Emirates shirt and things like that. And that has been a slowly growing business rather than the explosion that I expected it to be. But it's still doing well. But I think that's one of the things that I would say is the use of technology, social media, and the way fans engage with the sport. Everyone talks about it, the way younger fans look at short form content. It's not now a 90-minute game and that's at the center of the engagement. It's much more around short form during the game, after the game, around the game. The actual 90 minutes of a football game is now not.
That
It has to always be the main thing that everything's pulled from. But I know a lot of football fans who actually won't watch that 90 minutes and they'll just watch clips. And I think when I was your age, for example, that was impossible. You would first watch the full game if you could, and only then watch highlights or whatever on match of the day or whatever it was. These days it's actually flipped. And the other thing as well is technologies allow people to engage with at the stadium in different ways, the way they talking at the top level much more. Tier one football, obviously with smart stadia gives a lot more, but we have to remember that that's still only a very small percentage of fandom. Most of the stadiums around the world are still old school stadiums. Most of the fan experience is still old school, going to watch the game without access to smart technology and things like that. So it's when you're at the stadium, I think things haven't changed that much. If you go to the game, you go to the game and enjoy the game. And I think that's very healthy, by the way. I sound like an old man when I say that, but I think it's healthy. You go with your friends or your family and watch a game and sit down and don't do much else. Even though I'm pretty sure you look at it every time I go to the game, you see a lot of people on there.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
checking live. I even do it myself. I'm checking live score to get the updates from other games at the same time, just to make sure I'm in the know of what's going on. But I think it's something very healthy that you'll sit there and watch a game. So at the game, I don't think it's changed that much for the most part. Obviously, top tier football, Premier League football has become very, very corporate.
Mm-hmm.
The swing towards the amount of people who come and watch a top tier game who are not really fans is big in the last 10, 15 years. I think it's a shame.
Mm-hmm.
I think you get a much better view of football if you go to a championship game or a League One game, because there it's just going to be real fans. Or if you go up to
Mm-hmm.
Scotland or something like that and see a Scottish game, you're going to see, proper
Yeah.
game. But from a fan's point of view. Yeah, quite a long-winded answer to your question, I think.
No, no, that's interesting, right? Yeah, when you were talking about how you were setting up Redwood, so you mentioned that for 8 months you were doing something and then collecting data, and then you figure out that there is a value. And right now you were talking about, different types of the data for fans, right? And the content. My question is to you is how you figured out which data is actually valuable and which is noise, like you said. How
Mhm.
do you did it and what data? Yeah, the first part of the question, how?
So it's a statistical job at the end of the day. If you can't jump to conclusions based on what your hypothesis says. So when you're doing statistical work, you start with a hypothesis, such as I think teams that play like this are going to be scoring more goals. And in order to prove or disprove that hypothesis, you need enough data to show it. Now, the thing is that takes time and it takes money. A lot of companies and people will make a hypothesis, assume it to be true, and just state that, oh, yeah, look, 70% possession, anyone who can hold the ball for 70% of the time, they're easily going to be the better team. And I can tell you that's complete nonsense. There is literally no indication from possession for a better side. It's very circumstantial. And you wouldn't know that if you haven't done the work, So I'm giving that little bit of tidbit for free on this podcast. It's
Mm-hmm.
just an indication to where people think something about a sport. Let's take football as the best example. And it just needs to be statistically analyzed to see if it's true or not. But you need hundreds, if not thousands, of similar examples to run modeling on to see if you're right or if you're wrong. And even though we've got some incredible experts on football in this company, the number of times we're wrong is much more than the number of times we're right. So it just gives you an idea. All of our work is on sports, and those people work day in, day out on football and watching football and understanding football. And yet their hypotheses will often be proven to be wrong and not actually have any standing as to whether it improves a player or a team. And so you need a lot of data to be able to prove that. The massive change in the last few years has been that technology has improved so much that we can gather now much more data much quicker. So we can get to our answers quicker. And that's critical because back in 2004, 2005, we'd need to look at one particular piece of data for months, literally months, before we could find something. And then it was the biggest disappointment where you were excited about something and then you've spent God knows how much money and time looking at it, and then statistically it comes out saying, "Yeah, no, it's not valuable at all." It's disappointing, but that's the way stats works.
Okay, yeah, so having a lot of data, but it's really interesting. Like, let's say when you started, there was a lack of data, right?
Yeah,
But right now, so I have a couple questions. So first of all, we have a data overload. Could you agree with this? Like a lot of data over there.
yeah. Let's say information overload. Like, just there's so much coming out all the time now, and in some ways that's also it's an advantage for a company such as ours because not many people will understand which of that information is useful and which is useless. And it takes experts to understand that. And so the more data comes out, the chances that a lot of the extra data that comes out will actually be very unvaluable. And so if
Mm-hmm.
other people are relying on that and coming to their conclusion based on that, then that's better for my company if we're coming to more correct conclusions by using the correct data. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't mind basically that there's lots more data out there.
Yeah, and that led me actually to the next question, right? So I could understand when, let's say it's 2004 outside,
Yeah.
and you figure out the, main metrics that would work out, the main scenes. But right now it's 2025, and you mentioned that you are still doing the development, learning which metrics are working, which are the disappointing. It is actually much quicker, but you're still doing this. I'm wondering, like, yeah, are you actually still figuring out the scenes that could work better than other scenes? And yeah, what are they? Like, just a couple
Yeah.
examples.
I mean, I realized many years ago that there's actually no end to our exploration. And football's the best example of this because it's such a dynamic sport. Anyone who's played football knows that if I'm attacking the goal, if the defender in front of me is standing like closing me down tight or standing 2 meters off me, that makes a big difference, to my ability to create a pass and complete a pass or to shoot or to do whatever I want as my next move. If I'm facing the goal or if I'm like sideways onto the goal, it makes a big difference. And if you think that's not easy to pick up, you would need to deliver systems that someone would actually need to manually understand the angle of the player, the proximity of the other players, or good enough technology to do that. So there's a lot of stuff that has only been able to be picked up in the last few years. And so that's always made me think, well, technology is always going to improve. And so there's stuff that you will always be able to do better. And so even if you've understood that this makes a difference, how do I actually pick it up in a way that is effective, that is cost effective as well, and I can actually come to my conclusions? I remember I was sitting in a board meeting in 2012, so this is 13 years ago. And one of the board members who's not involved on the football side at all is a finance guy, and he said, "Well, surely we've eked out everything we need to, that can be known about football." I looked at him, I said, "Are you kidding me?" I said, "No, not at all." I said, "There's so much to explore." And I think that if we've cracked football, we've got everything, then that would be a very sad day in many, many ways. I don't think it's possible. I think that and things are changing. Let's not forget that as well. I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, the rule changed to allow more injury time. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The impact of that change from instead of having your standard 2 or 3 minutes of injury time, we now experience 8, 9, 10 minutes. A lot of people think, well, okay, so what is that going to lead to? That's going to lead to some more goals overall in the game. Yes, but it's also going to lead to other things as well. Changes the way, whether subconsciously or consciously, teams actually approach those last 5, 10 minutes of regular time until the 90th minute.
Wow.
And so it's like, hang on, and so some things are not even planned. A change like that is made. VAR. Think about how many things changed with VAR. And some of the things are understood. It's an intentional change. Some of the things, the effects, are not intentional. They're just side effects, but they do change the way the football actually works. The substitutions, the timing of the substitutions, the aggressiveness of the players, the defensiveness of the players. And sometimes it's psychological and the players don't even realize they're doing it, but that's our job. And so, when things change, it means that we're going to have our work, full forever, hopefully. that's what I hope anyway. And that's just like, those are just legal changes. I'll give you another one that I don't know if you're old enough to know about, but we learned a lot from a tactical point of view from Mourinho. So
From Mourinho?
Jose Mourinho, the
Yeah, okay.
Portuguese coach,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
when he was at Inter in particular, because his stint at Inter as coach was basically the way the whole tiki-taka reign over football by Barcelona was ended. For a few years in the 2007, 8, 9, it was like tiki-taka. They would just it completely destroyed teams through this tiki-taka style. And it took the genius of Mourinho, and I have a lot of appreciation for him, to realize that there's absolutely no point chasing the ball. I can actually control the game by letting them have the ball. Goes back to what I said about possession.
Yeah.
Actual possession doesn't mean you're controlling the game. And Mourinho was a genius at being able to control the game. He did it at Chelsea as well, without having possession of the ball. And he was one of the first to do this at the top level. And then there came a lot of followers after that started to play in a similar style, choosing to control the game from a place of non-possession. And for us, it was a real learning curve. We had to change a lot of our models because of it. It was really fascinating. So just as a wide answer to your question, there are changes to the laws, there are changes to the levels of play, there are changes to tactics, and so our work is never ending.
Okay, yeah, just a question from myself, like from my personal view when I was playing. And have you found like internally a correlation between, let's say, like, yeah, let me try to phrase it. So basically, if the team is playing like 0-0, someone scores, and then oftentimes we see, let's say, it's 25 minutes left, let's say in soccer, right? And the
Yeah.
one who is losing is always putting more pressure, more shots, like, and they feel like on their way to score, and they actually, if they score, they actually, I mean, in the psychological game, even though it's 1-1, those who were losing before, they
Yeah.
scored the game. Yeah. And my question to you is, have you found the correlation between the losing team and their ability to, to win, not to win the game, but put the pressure on? Have you found that the losing team at the end of the game is putting more pressure, and mathematically say?
I think there are too many variables to actually have something conclusive here, and I'll explain what that is. So, the style of coaching is a variable that is just changing all the time. I worked with a coach once who was so difficult. I won't tell you who it is. He's well known. So difficult because we used to joke that he protects the 1-0 defeat, which just
Okay.
makes no sense. Yeah, it's like if he was losing 1-0, he'd do the opposite of what you're saying. He'd go more defensive, okay, just to make sure they don't go 2-0 down. Now, if you're playing normal league format, like that doesn't make sense. What are you playing for, goal difference? No, you have to logically try to get that equalizer, okay? And he was just a complete non-risk taker that in his warped mind it would be like the right thing to sort of protect the 1-0 defeat, which makes no sense in football, let's face it. Yeah. It's like you
Yeah.
you could say that if you're even in the league, if you're losing 1-0, why aren't you sending the goalkeeper up even in the last minute? Like, do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
I would have no problem personally with teams that did that, even though most people say, "Are you mad? It's only a league game. It's not a cup final." I'm like, well, it's 0 points instead of the potential 1 point.
Mm-hmm.
And the downside of the extra goal you might get on the break is probably worth it for the one goal you might score every now and then, which gives you that 1 point and the equalizer. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
so that's one thing that's about a big variable. The second thing that is also not obvious to the naked eye is that when a team presses,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll know this very well yourself as well. So the sort of amateur eye will see a team pressing. What they won't see potentially is the amount of holes that they're creating in their back two
Mm-hmm.
lines because of pressing, trying to score, trying to get that goal. It's not easy to do both. It's not easy to push and press the opposition whilst keeping a very, very rigid back line, especially after the 70th minute when people are starting to get tired on the pitch. And so, objectively, it might look like a team is pressing, but objectively, they're actually much more likely to get scored against rather than score themselves. And you just have to have the expertise to understand when and where that's happening. And most people will be looking at it and they'll be counting the wrong things. They'll be counting the amount of press and they won't be counting, because it's off the ball and it's much harder to look at stuff that's off the ball. They won't be counting the holes that are there. And if the other team,
Mm-hmm.
even though they're leading 1-0, just play that one pass behind the
Mm-hmm.
back line, then their chance of a second goal is actually very, very high, and much higher than that team who's losing to score. I don't think there's anything that can be mathematically proven. It's just too wide an area.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be too many variables that will probably show up as like inconclusive at the end from a statistical point of view. But it's an interesting thing to look at from the psychology aspect of how teams play
Mm-hmm.
and why they do what they do.
Okay, interesting. And let's say in Redwood, right? You mentioned that one part of the data is for coaches, like really performance data, but that data could be used in different avenues, like fans and etc.
Sure.
So how do you now work? Like, do you collect all data and then you classify it by the ICPs, the people who will be using, and yeah, how does it work in terms of getting data to different consumers and tailoring it to
Sure.
their needs?
Well, the first thing is gathering enough data that you've got your database organized, and you can cross-reference between different leagues and you can cross-reference between different players. And so once you've got your database, then the products and services need to just be matched with market demand, which is the hardest thing. I say that's all it had. That's just that, but that's the hardest thing. You got so okay. Let's say we've got to put ourselves in a position that any request that comes our way, whether it's from the professional teams or national teams or media or fan engagement or betting industry or whatever comes our way, we'll be able to look into our database and create a service or a feed that will answer that requirement. So the first thing is just making sure that you've got your database with as much data in there as possible and it's organized correctly so that you can just sample it. And it depends what it is. I mean, some requirements are live, which is difficult and technologically it's a challenge, of course. Others are post-match. If a team is looking to buy a player and they want due diligence on that player 3 years back, then obviously it's post-match and you've got to just get a good report of that player with all his data properly funneled in the right way. So um, I'm not sure if that quite answers your question, but it's really listening to the market, what it needs. If we think about the market split into three verticals, what I call the professional vertical, which is the professional clubs and national teams. You've got the betting vertical and you've got the media vertical. So, we've got three different verticals we're looking at. So whatever requirement comes in from one of those verticals, we can hopefully say we've got a product that we can build for you. But we build very, very highly customized products. We don't tend to work off the shelf like many other companies do.
Okay, so you are customizing the products to actual needs. And what are the actual biggest revenue streams, avenues for you that you're working on? Like if we divide it into the three.
I think the widest one will come from the betting industry because they want a wide range of coverage, whether it's, they don't want specifically one team. Will just give me a number of leagues because that's what they need their data for. The deeper ones come from the professional side. So they'll say, give me very deep analysis on one league or one club.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if you're working for one club, then it's just constantly looking at their analysis, their data and their opponents. So I think those are the biggest ones. Media is smaller for us. I think
Mm-hmm.
there will be the vast majority of requirements we get on the media side. We'll just say, yeah, it's best to go to another one of the better providers for that. It's less our bag, to be honest. We're much
Mm-hmm.
more
Mm-hmm.
customized product. We're quite high end.
Okay, yeah, got you. And when you started, were you aiming like to have you already knew the idea if we're gonna, sell it to all of the avenues, or have you aimed at media only since you're from broadcasting work, or what was the idea over there?
I wish I could tell you that it was really well planned out and I had it all very understood, but it wasn't the case at all. It was much more a let's build this because we think that there's big benefit. I think that we had more hope actually, even though I came from the media side, we had more optimism around the professional clubs and the betting sides than the
Hmm.
media side, and that's pretty much how it turned out in the end. But it wasn't like we had it all figured out and we knew exactly how they were going to interact with us at all. It was really a very new proposition when we started, and we didn't get our first clients for a short while, but when we did, then they started coming in and paying us well to do what we did.
Okay, yeah, Daniel. So we'll be wrapping up soon, but I have blitz questions for you that I'm really interested to ask. So,
True.
first one, what is your favorite sport?
I think it was always football, but I think I'm going back to cricket in many ways. I love cricket. I used to play cricket as a young man, and I love the way cricket has developed. And so probably my heart is closer to cricket. I'll watch a cricket match happier than I'll watch a football match these days.
Okay, got you. Who is your favorite athlete?
Ooh, for me, I always look when it comes to like top athletes, it's always people who have impacted lives well beyond the game. And actually, like Michael Jordan
Yeah.
behind me, I think he's one of the best. And a lot of people don't like Jordan. For me, he took basketball to a different level. And he took people's lives to a different level through the personality and the charisma. If you think about people on that level, Muhammad Ali for me was an incredible athlete who, way beyond his performances in the ring, just impacted people's lives. And I think that that's what sports there to do. It's not just as a pure entertainment on the pitch. These are characters that can influence people, especially the young, to be better people. And so when you ask me about my favorite athlete, it's always going to be beyond just what they do on the field of play. So yeah, Jordan and Muhammad Ali, I think, are my two all-time favorites.
Okay, yes. What is the favorite part of your job?
Building stuff. I love building stuff. Whenever I've got like a new thing, a new project, a new event or something, then I get my teeth into it and I get a team together and we start thinking together, and that's what I love. It's that sort of 0 to 1 entrepreneurial journey that I love. And so if I don't have that, I feel like I get itchy feet. I feel like
Uh-huh.
if I'm in a place where things are working and I don't have something new, then I feel like I can get itchy feet. And I've actually been at fault in the past of just trying to push change for change's sake, and I've had to learn that about myself, and it's not a good thing. But that's the entrepreneur in me, is that I love building stuff and I love constantly creating, and so that's my favorite side, definitely.
Okay, but what is the downside then? What is the worst part?
All the opposite. Like I've had to train myself to be good enough, and I'll say good enough because I'm never going to be expert at it. At the stuff that's really important, like the admin side, and making sure that the structure is set up correctly, corporate structure, tax, finance, legal, all of these things work well because otherwise you're building a house of cards, and I've done that as well, and something that looks really cool, and but everything needs to rely on nothing going wrong ever. That just doesn't happen. Things will always go wrong, and so if you're not structured correctly, if you don't have your financial regulatory setup checked out properly, and have your reporting, and all the finance side is so critical in business. It's so critical, and a lot of people find it boring, and I'm included in that, but it's so important to get right. So I've had to train myself to be good enough at it, or at least hire people who are excellent at it to make sure that it compensates for my lack of interest in it.
Yeah, so I could see, there are different types of the mindset, and then there is a mindset of entrepreneur and
Yeah.
CEO. Like CEOs build systems and, making everything structured, and entrepreneurs trying new things and,
Yeah.
trying to find that's could describe you, right?
Yeah, exactly. And what's important is that whichever side you're on, you need to surround yourself with people who pull you the other way or balance
Hmm.
you in some way. So I've always been blessed with people next to me who have been expert at making sure that we've got a steady ship, and that they're reflecting back to me when I'm trying to push something, and where's the actual business value here? Is there an actual business value, or is it just, as I said, change for change's sake because
Hmm.
Daniel's bored today or something like that? It's ridiculous. If you're like me, you need people around you, whether they're your partners or your senior employees or whatever, who will make sure, and they need to feel open to be able to tell you, stop, this is not the right way to go. We need to think about this. We need to calculate the risk here and before we move forward. And so having that sort of diverse type of character in your team is absolutely critical. If you're the other way, you need someone who will pull you into the entrepreneurial direction.
Okay, and last in last, what one piece of advice would you give to young entrepreneurs who want to create value, who want to, create businesses around sports, and overall, just one piece of advice?
Well, overall, I think that the most important thing is that if I think about the number of people who want to do something and then the tiny percentage of those people who actually go and do something, it just testifies to an inability to move forward. Like most people that I see, they'll have big dreams, but what does it matter? They won't actually do something. And it sounds so obvious, but I'm telling you, it's the biggest thing. Is just go and do stuff. Literally. It's like you can't imagine that you know what will happen when you step forward onto that path. There will always be something that you didn't expect, and that thing could be good. And the people that you'll meet will lead you to the next thing. And the only way to guarantee that you won't succeed is just to not do stuff. That's a guaranteed not succeed. It's just, and too many people are in that position. They're just paralyzed by whether it's a fear of what might happen or what might go wrong, or maybe they're scared of something else. I don't know, but you've just got to do stuff. And I think that the trigger to being able to do that is to understand that you just don't know. A lot of young people, they think they've got it all figured out. On the one hand, they think, well, I know everything. I've got a 23-year-old son who was very much infected with this I know it all disease. And thankfully, he's been an entrepreneur for 2 years, and there's nothing like being an entrepreneur to make you realize you really don't know anything.
Mm-hmm.
I think once you realize that you don't know much at all because there's so much of the world and so many people you haven't met and whatever, you accept that. That's actually very wise. And when you realize that you don't know stuff, then it allows you to just go and explore much more. If you think you know it all, then why should I go and explore? Do you understand the sort of counter logic there? And I remember I gave a talk to sort of 25, mid-20s people out in Africa recently, and they're all sort of trying to start up in business. And I gave them an analogy. I said, if you think about life like a big field in front of you, and it's just covered with snow. I was telling this to African people who've probably never seen snow, but so imagine it's just covered in snow, like that, 2 feet high, and hidden under the snow are rocks and stones of different sizes. And these rocks are basically opportunities, but they're hidden under the snow. The only way to go and find them is to take a chance and start walking, wading through the snow. And often by chance, you're just going to hit a rock, and that will be an opportunity. Sometimes it'll be a small one, sometimes it'll be a big one. You're not going to find that rock if you don't start walking. And I like that analogy because, to be honest, a lot of the opportunities we find in life are a mixture of us taking a chance and luck. And people underestimate the impact of luck and circumstance in our life. It's enormous. It's enormous. But if you don't walk into the snow and try and find it, it ain't finding you. That's for sure. And so that is the number one piece of advice that I'd give for young people is just do things. Just do things. And if you don't do things, you're much more likely to regret them. And you might do things that you regret as well. But if you've done something and you regret it, I've noticed this as well. And there's a famous quote somewhere that says, regret for things we've done is tempered by time. Over time, our regret reduces for things that we've done. But regret for something we've not done is just inconsolable. It will just stay with us forever. And I think that is so true. It's so true. If you're like, that girl you wanted to speak to and you never had the balls to do it and whatever, like that will stay with you forever. So just do it. And if she shoots you down, you'll regret it and you'll feel crap for a while, but that will go after a while. And I think that's true about life. You just got to do stuff. It's as simple as that. Just do stuff. Nothing cleverer than that, really.
Yeah, the most fear, I think the biggest fear, not everyone, but like for me personally, and everyone who is trying to do stuff have, I think, like when you're at the end of your life, let's say you're 90 or you're 100 years old, and you're looking back to the things you have not ever done and tried. And like you said, like if I want to approach a girl and I afraid to do it and I'm not doing it, or if I want to start that business but I was afraid, and then at the end point of your life you're looking back, and I think this is the worst place to be in, like understanding
absolutely.
that you wasted your potential, right, and you wasted you haven't fully uncovered yourself.
And I think also, Kirill, I think you're a great example of how to be a young guy and doing stuff. I mean, you've recently moved to the States and you opened this podcast and you're doing stuff. And I think you're my guru of getting stuff done, that I've met over the over the recent period. And I think you should be applauded for this. I think you'd be a great role model for young people in their, just starting out, of how to just get on and do stuff, trying stuff. And I applaud you for everything that you're doing and pushing forward with.
Daniel, appreciate it. Appreciate it. All right. Yeah. So, Daniel, thank you for sharing your thoughts. Thank you for sharing the entrepreneur mindset at the end. So, is there anything that you'd like to cover, like any thoughts, anything at the end?
Oh, I just really appreciate you reaching out to me and having this chat with you. It's lovely to meet a strong young mind who just wants to move life in a positive way. And I just want to say that I appreciate you and I wish you all the best with all of your endeavors. Good luck.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, Kel.